And welcome back, and we begin this half hour, the Denver mayoral debate, talking about equity. And our first question comes from former mayoral candidate Lisa Calderon, who placed third in the April election.
Nearly half of Denver residents are people of color, with the largest share being Latinos at about 34%. However, the Hancock and Hickenlooper administrations fell far short of appointing women of color to key leadership positions. Will you, as mayor, appoint women of color to your leadership and transition teams and include my input?
Kelly, we'll begin with you.
Absolutely, but let me describe the process I want to go through because it's exciting. I look at those cabinet positions as the most critical decision that I'll make as your mayor. And so I will create stakeholder groups, community coming together to help identify who are the best applicants. And this kind of process works for two reasons. One is by having diverse stakeholders help look at resumes, identify critical issues, we'll get the chance to ensure everyone who applies really gets careful consideration. But my experience is it also encourages really diverse applicants and top talent to apply. The second reason I'll do it this way, and I'll hire from the top qualified candidates that stakeholder group recommends, is because it also means that we hire someone that our stakeholders, people who care deeply about that job, now are invested in, that there's ownership, and together we can begin the work immediately. I think we'll make more progress and have more success. That's what my process will look like.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Calderon, for the question. Absolutely. The answer is we will ensure that we have both incredibly diverse transition teams and incredibly diverse leadership teams, including making sure women of color are heavily represented in those moments. I've had the chance to lead in different roles over the course of my life, starting as a school principal. I led 3 different schools around the metro area. And in each of those places, one of the most important keys to success is making sure you have diverse leaders around you who have connections to the community, to the kids, to the neighborhood, who have different lived experiences. That always makes a leadership group stronger. The same was true when I was in the state Senate and opened a community office in North Park Hill. We had the chance to be both leading with community and neighbors and also making sure that those community leaders had voices in our policy work. We created a citizens cabinet, which was made up of all of those neighbors who had experience, lived experience, or expertise on a given topic who could help inform the policies that we chose. Did that as a foundation leader, and we'll absolutely do that as the next mayor, is to make sure we have a cabinet that looks like our city and we have a transition team that looks like our city.
Thank you both. So continuing the conversation now on equity, Desiree has the next question.
This question comes from Servicios de la Raza. How do you intend to increase resources for community-led initiatives by community-based organizations of color?
Mike, why don't you begin?
Thank you. Yeah, I've been proud to partner with Servicios de la Raza in the past, and proud to have the support of Nita and Rudy, who are working so hard to make that happen there. What we know is that the city can't solve all these problems on their own. And the only way we get big problems solved is by actually being able to partner with nonprofits who have the most expertise, they're the closest to the problem, and they have the relationships that are able to deliver really transformational results in our neighborhoods. So the way I would approach it is to say, what's the big problem we're trying to solve? Whether that's homelessness, whether that's mental health support, whether that's affordable housing, and then who are the community leaders that are closest to that problem? Who are the ones that have real insight into what's working and what's not? How do we get them at the table to help us design the solution, and then have them at the table to help us decide how to deliver the services and the programs that people need, and how to make sure we can put the best programs and the best people connected to those services, so that we know people are getting services from community members they know and trust that are delivering real results on the taxpayer dollars that we're using.
Thank you. Kelly?
I will absolutely engage our community and our diverse community partners in this work. And I'll give you an example of how I've done it in my history. When I was CEO of the Chamber of Commerce in 2018, we set out to address the inequities we saw in our economy around race and gender. And what we did is engage exactly these community partners to identify the most critical issues, but more importantly, the strategies and the approaches to remove barriers so we could address home ownership in our region and address the fact that people of color are less likely to own a home, to address the income inequities that we see for gender and race, and to address even educational attainment. When we did the work that way, what we found is our community partners could identify the barriers, and we were way more successful at removing those barriers and addressing the issue. I'd do the same thing as your mayor, partner with our community so we can get the issues right and get the strategies right and make progress.
Thank you. We're going to move on to policing and public safety. And our first question comes from former mayoral candidate Andy Rougeau, who placed 4th in the April election.
Denver saw almost a tripling of murders in the past 10 years. We're one of the car theft capitals of the country. However, both you, Mike, and you, Kelly, have said you're unsure or unwilling to increase police funding. Will you commit to increasing funding for police and increasing the number of police officers above our budgeted strength?
And Kelly, we'll let you go first.
Yeah, my focus, and good to hear from you, Andy. My focus on this is we have an authorized strength of 1,600 today, and we're about 150 officers still short. I attended the academy graduation of 37. This was about a month ago, and I've met with the new academy class, which has about 57 officers in it. We're building, but I'm going to guess we're still going to be about 100 short even with that. My commitment is to hit the 1,600 and to focus on increasing our mental health professionals, our STAR responders, so we free our officers up to be at the issues we most critically need them to be at. By doing that, I think we can address both of the issues. To your point, Andy, of making sure we respond and can address the community safety issues from a police perspective, but also serve our community on the mental health issues that they need us on today.
Thank you. Mike?
Thanks. Yeah, we know you can't feel at home in a city where you don't feel safe. If you ever had the experience of walking out the front of your house to your car being stolen, or coming home to your house being robbed, or having to sit at your kitchen table and talk to your kids about their fears of school shootings, you know how real that is. And so I do believe to take this on, it's going to require more officers and more first responders. That's why I've committed to putting 200 more first responders onto the street. That would include both officers, would include mental health workers, and would include paramedics and EMTs. But it also means deploying them to a different kind of job. It means recruiting those people from the communities that they serve, so they represent the neighborhoods that they're going to serve. It means training them differently to have them be able to be expert in how to build relationships and de-escalate conflict. And it means deploying them to a different type of job. I want back a real version of community-based policing, where we have officers that are walking neighborhoods, they're visible, they're talking to neighbors, they're giving you their business cards, you can see them and ask them a question, and they can do what I did as a school principal, which is be out in the hallways to stop bad decisions before they happen.
Thank you both. Let's go to Desiree now with our next question.
This question comes from Reverend Ben Sanders from New Hope Baptist Church. He asks, what policies would you enact to help create a system that holds bad police officers accountable? Mike, you can go first.
Thanks, great to see you, Ben, and always great to see you preach. You people should show up at New Hope and hear him. I do think a really important part of this is accountability. You know, I say there are certain professions where we expect incredibly high levels of execution. You don't go to DIA and get on an airplane and say, oh, it's great, this airline has 70% of their pilots are pretty good, but the other 30% continue to crash. When you have high levels of public safety involved in something like a police officer, we should expect high levels of accountability. And this is a place where Kelly and I have different opinions. I supported the legislation that put in place officer accountability, including meaning if someone violated someone's constitutional rights, the way that the folks did that killed George Floyd, they could be accountable and civilly liable. I want to keep that accountability in place. I don't think we should go back on it. And I want to make sure we both recruit a well-prepared and trained force, but also that we hold people accountable to the highest standards, because when you have that public trust, you have to make sure you deliver on it. I think we should expect that of every officer.
And Kelly?
Yeah, let me first say, Mike, that's a misrepresentation. I do support that legislation. And to the question, let me focus on, I've been endorsed by the almost 1,500 police officers who serve our city every single day, and by the Greater Denver Ministerial Alliance, representing over 40 Black churches. I appreciate this question because I think this is exactly what the next mayor has to do, is bring our community together to address these kinds of issues, where we prove we're capable of holding our officers accountable and at the same time supporting them. And there is no relationship in our life where both of those things don't have to be true. I would use the Office of the Independent Monitor to help do this work, which is already in place and established. We also have a director of the Department of Safety who's a civilian who oversees some of this work. But just as importantly to me is, I'll focus on changing our police department and the culture, becoming more transparent, so we can gain trust with community and also ensure we're getting constant feedback to improve our service.
All right, Joe has our last question on this topic.
You both have discussed that by the time a crime happens, the mayor has already failed their constituents. What would be your focus when it comes to crime prevention, and how can a mayor effectively prevent crime? Kelly?
Thanks, Joe. This is a space that comes from some experience when I was John Hickenlooper's chief of staff when he was mayor. And the chief of police came to me one May with concerns about we were seeing a rise in violence among our youth. And instead of simply adding officers, what we did is, for the first time in Denver's history, we opened our rec centers for free. And what we saw that summer is we saw both our kids as victims of crime, but also committing crime. Both went down. To this day, our rec centers are free. What you'll see is every single member of my cabinet focus on what they control in terms of the drivers of crime. And we know what they are. Stable housing, so we'll focus on making sure our families are in stable housing. We'll focus on access to economic opportunity through our Department of Economic Development. We'll focus on making sure our kids have recreational opportunities, are forming relationship with peers and adults. We'll focus on supporting Denver Public Schools to deliver the education that gives our kids hope and a possible future. Those are the things that will reduce crime in our city.
Thank you. Mike?
I think that's important. This topic is about three things. It's about prevention, it's about intervention, and it's about safety. The prevention steps are the best way to keep a 17-year-old from getting his hands on a gun is make sure that that child, when he's 12, gets his hand on a passion, a sense of purpose, a sense of commitment, the thing that gets you up in the morning, keeps you in positive peer groups. And for me, that's why I would support expanding a program we established that would allow kids to get access to after school and summer school programming in areas of their passion, whether it's arts, whether it's athletics, whether it's science, whether it's math. That's critical. Second is when we know that there is a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old or any person who's made some initial bad decisions and is getting into the criminal justice system, that's when you have to really provide wraparound intervention. Therapy, counseling, support, intervention. For many of the school-based violence we've seen, we had early indications those young people were at risk. We didn't get them the intervention that they need. And third is we have to put people in the settings where they're most likely to be safe. That may mean alternative schools or alternative settings for young people and intervention and probation for adults.
All right, we want to talk about school safety at Colorado's largest school district. After the shooting death of a student, Luis Garcia, and another shooting injured two deans at East High School, a Denver7 investigation uncovered there are dozens of students currently on pat-down protocols in DPS schools. So how can you help make effective change as a mayor in a district where you have no oversight? Kelly, you're first.
Well, as a school principal, I have navigated this problem many
Mike,
times.
you go first. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I thought you said, am I first?
Yeah.
Go
Great.
ahead, yes.
As a school principal, I've navigated this problem multiple times, which is you have young people that have different sets of needs. I ran alternative schools that serve kids with very serious criminal histories, and we were well suited to support those young people. And so I think that means if someone has a gun background and they've been expelled for bringing a gun to school before, it doesn't mean the best placement for them is in a 3,000 student comprehensive high school. They're all smaller alternative settings where we can give that student a great public education, but actually still make sure that that young person is safe and the rest of the students around him or her are safe. What I would do here is I would partner more directly with the school district. I would make sure we reinstitute the school district coordinating committee where you have city council people and school board members, mayor and superintendent sitting down and talking. I would work on more of the after school and summer programming, work on more of the mental health support we can provide through Denver Health to the district. And in places where we disagree, I would make that clear too and be able to call out publicly what I think the district needs to do. But we want to start with partnership, but make sure we're never compromising people's public safety.
All right, Kelly, your turn.
Thank you. I would definitely focus on the partnership aspect from, as you point out, and the mayor doesn't have direct control over our schools. And so here's a few things from my experience as chief of staff. We ran the city school coordinating committee, which brought together school board members and the superintendent, the mayor and city council, and you could talk about these issues and explore solutions together. But it resulted in really meaningful advances, like we started picking up, the city of Denver started picking up trash for our school district to save them money so they didn't have to pay a contractor to do it. I think that same kind of expertise could come from our police department on what are strategies to make our schools safe, what are strategies to ensure our kids are safe, and that there's alternatives for kids who maybe aren't ready or prepared to be in our schools. I also think, though, this is where we have to restore confidence in our school board. And in November, there's 3 seats up, and I would advocate for 3 people in November who restore confidence that they're running our school district, both educating our kids and keeping them safe.
So you both would be vocal about who is running for school board and let it be known who you support.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Our next topic covers transportation. Desiree will have the question about RTD, and Kelly will start. So, Des?
The Regional Transportation District provides nearly all of Denver's transit services, yet it faces long-term budget issues, isn't affordable for all Denverites, and doesn't reach all neighborhoods. Is it city government's responsibility to step up and pay for more transit service in the city, and if so, how would you approach that?
Yeah, we're seeing it already, Desiree, where the city of Denver is looking at bus rapid transit on Colfax. I'll be looking at it on Colorado Boulevard, Federal Boulevard, huge opportunities. But I've also met with the general manager at RTD. I've met with some of the board members there to talk about the challenge. We have to make that system work. It's a massive investment, but it's critical for air quality, for transportation, all those issues, and frankly, affordability. And so some of the things I'm encouraged that they're looking at is bringing that price down. I think we have to bring the price down for our employers to afford an EcoPass to extremely low levels, where every employer says, I'm buying that EcoPass, particularly for our transit-dependent employees, because it is so expensive to buy it on your own. I also think, and this is what I talked to RTD about, I think our students should ride for free, both our high school kids and our college students. These are trains and buses that are running already. Putting our kids on them is not an increase in expense, but it is an increase in utilization. And so I would partner with them to do those kinds of things.
Thank you. Mike?
I do think this is a real crisis where our current transit system is not being used well for a couple of reasons. One is people find it not always safe, they find it not always convenient, they find it not always reliable, and often not always affordable. And so there are things we have to do to change a number of those. There are some easy first steps. Our residents who work at the airport have to pay to use public transit to get there, which means they're in cars, adding more traffic to Pena Boulevard, and then having to pay for parking. We should make it easier for those employees to get to and from work on transit. We should also make it easier, as I laid out earlier, to get people to and from work downtown on public transit and be able to get access to those EcoPasses for free. What that would mean is more encouragement of people using transit and more ability for them to get to downtown, which is a neighborhood we want to revive anyway. Right now, actually, part of the reasons why it feels unsafe is because there aren't enough riders. By putting more riders onto the RTD, we both actually get more safety and we can get more reliability of routes, because the more riders we have, the more routes we can generate, the more frequent the bus or light rail becomes, and the more likely folks are to use it.
Thank you. Now, Denver's approach to streets has changed. We're learning how to divide that space between drivers and cyclists, scooters and pedestrians. Is Denver on the right path when it comes to adding more protected lanes for non-vehicle uses? And if so, how would you navigate the recurring tension in neighborhoods, such as when street parking is taken away by the city? Mike, you begin.
We know we have to do a both and. We know that there are a lot of folks like me with 3 kids who've got to run a lot of errands, who aren't going to be able to always use public transit to get to and from their next spot. So we do have to continue to make sure that we have accessible and easy to navigate roads for cars. But we do want to, every chance we can, find a way to make it easier for folks to get out of cars. That means, yes, if you are a biker or a bike commuter or want to take your family out for a ride, that means dedicated bike lanes that are safe. That means they either have a median between the bike lane and the drivers, or they have the sticks, or they have the ability to have an elevated road, something that provides real safety for you to take your daughter or your mother out on a ride. That's important. But we also can be able to build a network of maps. So you know if you're trying to get from southeast Denver to downtown or from northwest to southeast, you know what those routes are and how to get on them and access them. And so we can do both. We can both make it easy for vehicles, but we can also encourage people to get out of vehicles, to get onto bikes, and get into public transit. That's also why we want to build more of our housing around public transit to make it easier for folks to not have to have cars at all.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, I've commuted for 30 years on my bike. And so I have a lot of experience of understanding how great it can be. And in the beginning, when I started commuting, it was to save money on gas and parking. And so I think it's critically important that we make sure people have this option and it feels safe. But I also worry about, we have a vision zero. Vision zero is that we kill 0 pedestrians and 0 cyclists on their bike, and we're heading in the wrong direction. I am pro not killing people on their bike. So I really think we have to do a quick check to make sure we're making the right investments in the right place. I don't mean to slow it down, I mean to actually speed it up, so that we get this right and we are keeping people safe and our kids feel safe riding to school and we feel safe running errands or riding to work. And without doing that, we are never going to address the challenges we face in transportation or air quality or our environment. So I'm very committed to addressing this for all residents.
Okay, so on that Vision Zero question, Joe.
Kelly, you've talked about Vision Zero as needing to be reset. It's the plan to end all traffic deaths and serious injuries by 2020 or 2030. What exactly would you reset? How do you do that? How do you fix it?
Yeah, I think this is where we see other cities around the nation actually making great progress on their Vision Zero. They're seeing their numbers decline in people dying in traffic or in interaction with traffic. And so what I would do is look at those cities that are making great progress and ask the question, what are they doing and what do we need to change anything we're doing? But I've also seen more recently some studies that show if we could focus on the highest accident areas where we're seeing those collisions and make improvements there, I'm also going to guess we could see drastic improvement very quickly. So I would focus on the data that tells us where our problems and those collisions literally are occurring so we can make the improvements as a priority in those areas.
Mike, same question. How would you fix Vision Zero?
I think there are a couple of key steps. One is we do want to provide, as we discussed, as many incentives as possible for folks to get out of vehicles. And part of that means access to public transit. Another is being deliberate about how we try to build and develop neighborhoods, which was what many of us want, is the ability to have walkable neighborhoods where you can build housing that is connected to commercial and retail, where you can come out of your house, you can walk to the grocery store, you can walk to a restaurant, you can walk to your kid's school. And we know the places where we have those kind of neighborhoods that are walkable, we see less traffic deaths. Where we have places where you have massive major throughways coming in the middle of residential neighborhoods, and it's hard to pass, there aren't easy pedestrian walkways, there aren't easy biking walkways or biking ways, that really affects the safety. So it's a matter of both being deliberate about building a bike infrastructure around the city, giving people access to public transit, but also being thoughtful about how we're developing neighborhoods so they're built for pedestrians and for bikers, so you're not trying to put a pedestrian in the middle of a 6-lane road.
Thank you both. Our next conversation is about climate change, and Desiree has the question.
Denver is part of a bustling metro. Should there be a unified climate vision for the entire Front Range? And how, as mayor, could you lead that effort? Mike, you can go first.
Thanks. Well, we live in a city that many people have choose to move to or choose to stay in because of its proximity to the natural environment. That is part of Denver's essential brand. We also live in a city right now that tragically is one of the 6 or 7 worst in the country in terms of air quality. So that means on a given day you might want to take your mom or your daughter out for a hike this summer. You're not sure you'll be able to do that without putting some of their health at risk. We can't afford to keep that as the future for Denver. That's why I think it takes aggressive action to be able to move us towards a greener climate. Yes, I would partner with the region to be able to do it, but I also don't want to wait for the rest of the region. One of the opportunities Denver has is we don't have to wait for the federal government to act or wait for the state government to act. We can move aggressively to move off of fossil fuels, move to electrify our residential and commercial buildings, and use wind and solar to be able to power our resources around the city. So we are both building our economy and making it greener. And we can do that with a real eye on equity, on making sure we're getting resources to those communities that need it the most.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yes, yes, and yes, I'm going to say to this question. Listen, we can do all the things Mike just said and make huge advancements as Denver, but the concern is we can't make the impact we need to make by going it alone. And so I really would focus on how do we bring the region, even the state, with us in a commitment to make these goals that we have laid out. And here's the good news. We have serious resources available to us. And I think when we start to bring more partners into the work, I think we're going to increase the likelihood we could bring those resources home through the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Jobs Act. This is an opportunity for us to look throughout our region and make sure we're investing in those communities who've been the most negatively impacted in our history. Making a commitment, we've made a commitment of 50% of our funds going directly into those communities. And I would work with people throughout our region to ask they make the same commitment and do exactly the same work with us so we can have the kind of impact we have to have as we make this transition.
All right, thank you both. We're going to talk about leadership now. And Mike, this question is specifically for you. You have run several campaigns for several offices. Will you commit to the people of Denver to fulfill the full term of mayor? And how can you assure voters that you're not using this as a stepping stone to a more high-profile position?
Absolutely, I will commit to that. My entire reason for being in this race is that I believe deeply in Denver. I know that we have some real challenges to solve, but I am deeply committed to making sure we solve them. And so I am all in to make sure we can be the first city to say we took on major challenges around homelessness and we're able to make historic successes in both getting people access to services and being able to get access back for everyone to use our sidewalks and our public parks. We can be able to make this a city that's both thriving economically, and still one where everybody can afford to live. And we can make it both safe and protected in all of our neighborhoods. That's why I'm in this race. I was out of politics for 4 years, working at a foundation committed to solving these problems, and saw a real opportunity where the right mayor with the right vision could actually deliver something transformatively different than the challenges we have right now. I'm entirely committed to doing that and excited to partner with this city over the next 8 years to get it done.
Thank you. And Joe has our next question for Kelly.
Kelly, you served as the president and CEO of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce for more than a decade. During that time, did you ever advocate for a position that you morally disagreed with?
You know, Joe, this is an interesting question because I have obviously reflected a lot in the last 6 months about the work I did at the Chamber. And for me, I think about there's kind of a combination of two issues here. One is the stereotype of who the Chamber is. And I think about who the Chamber is, 3,000 members, has a 55-member board who guides those positions. Those 3,000 members, 80% of them are small businesses who are often led by women and people of color, LGBTQ plus community. And I think about the work they did, where they drove immigration reform around the nation with other business leaders. They helped open primaries for unaffiliated voters in our state, stood up to their own membership in oil and gas when we felt it wasn't the right approach that they were suggesting for our state, helped fund college for DPS graduates. So I've never thought of it as a difference in a moral obligation. I do understand. I might have taken a different position on something, but I also know these are people who care deeply about our community, just like you and I do.
All right, thank you both. We want to get to the closing statements portion of the night. Again, we flipped a coin to see who would go first. We begin with Kelly Brough. So, what sets you two apart? Why do you want this job? And you each have 60 seconds for this.
I don't think you're supposed to ask it that way. Listen, I'm running for this job because the truth is every beautiful thing I have in my life, I have because I chose Denver. And I'm so grateful my family chose Denver. And I share the same vision you have for our city as residents here. A vision where you too can create a community and raise your family, where you could start a business, where you could afford to buy a home again, where your kids get the education that they deserve, where you have access to real economic opportunity, where we house and shelter those who are most vulnerable, where we all feel safe in our neighborhoods. And I know that vision is possible because I've led the city before. When I was John Hickenlooper's chief of staff, and my experience tells me I have the skills and the ability to lead our city and bring back just what I described to you, our shared vision. I would love to have your vote and your support so we can get to work.
Thank you, Kelly. And now it's Mike's turn. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you, and thank you so much for joining us. I do think there are real differences on our approach on these things. I'm proud of the time I've spent dedicating myself to progressive battles for working families, things like supporting expanding minimum wage and supporting expanding family medical leave, things on which Kelly's had a different approach. But that's not, I think, the biggest question the city faces. The question we face is, what is possible for this city? What's a vision for the Denver we all want to build? And for me, the vision I have is a city where you can take your kids out to any neighborhood in Denver on a Friday night and sit on the 16th Street Mall and have a beer, and they can run around behind you and you not worry once about their safety. It's a city where you can take those same kids and drop them off to kindergarten and have that teacher swoop them up in their arms and give them a hug. And you know that teacher can still afford to live in this city that she serves. And it is a city where, yes, you can walk around through any of our neighborhoods at any time and not have to see anybody who has to sleep on the streets. That is a Denver we can build, and that's a Denver I'm committed to building together with your help. Thanks so much for having us tonight.
And we thank you both. And this wraps the closing statements from Kelly Brough and Mike Johnston. We truly thank you for your time, the opportunity to give our viewers, readers, listeners, the opportunity to hear your opinions on issues that matter to Denver. So yes, this concludes our Denver mayoral debate. Election day, as we all know, is June 6th. So thank you at home for watching. Join us tonight at 10 for a breakdown of this debate. We thank you again and good night.